Joe Rogan's a nobody, isn't he? Joe Rogan's nobody particularly important. That was the narrative that was put out by the media.
Joe Rogan.
Yeah, who's heard of this guy? When he joined, when he accepted the contract for $100 million with Spotify, as Michael Malice points out, look, they were all pushing this narrative. He's losing relevance since the Spotify move. Who cares? And to be honest with you, maybe, who knows? I don't use Spotify, so I don't know. I haven't been following his podcast because it's on Spotify. It's fine. I see the clips on YouTube every now and again.
But even then, if you went from 20 million to 10 million, that's still 10 million.
Yeah, I know. It's still massive. But anyway, so you may, of course, be aware of the tremendous controversy around this complete nobody that nobody cares about because he interviewed some people who had questions about the official COVID narrative, and these people were obviously total nobodies. Dr. Malone, who's involved or is partially responsible for the invention of the vaccines, and another doctor of some sort who's
also prolific spreaders of misinformation.
They are.
I'm bound to say with a gun to my head.
The YouTube terms of service certainly tell us that we have to say that. And so the people who know nothing about anything and who used to be raging against the machine are now collecting their pensions and have been like, look, you've got to take our music off. It's us or Joe Rogan. And so this began with Neil Young, obviously, as we covered previously. But then you got other boomer musicians who came out and basically made the same demand. I mean, who the hell is Joni Mitchell?
That way you're looking at me.
Well, I know. That's the point. Your generation, I'd have to ask my parents. Dad, have you ever heard of Joni Mitchell? I don't know who this person is, but apparently they're like, oh, well, they want their music withdrawn from Spotify just like Paul Young and Neil Young. And it's okay, but why does it...
Gotta get his name right.
No, I don't know.
Nobody knows the hell he is.
Yeah. He made one song that I'm aware of. It was actually a terrible song, but anyway. But the point is, the BBC have covered this, in a segment, breathlessly. Now, musician Joni Young wants her music pulled. Who cares? There's a Twitter spat over some American crap, BBC. I don't care about this. But then you've got someone else, and I'm going to try and pronounce his name because I've never heard of them. Nils Lofgren. Have you ever heard of this person? Solidarity with Neil Young, though.
I mean, I know I am not the best person to ask, but a big no.
I've never heard of these people. Yeah. I should have heard of these people, right? But listen to this, and this is just the programming of the NPC speaking through his mouth. A few days ago, my wife Amy and I became aware of Neil and Daryl Hannah standing with hundreds of healthcare professionals, scientists, doctors, and nurses in calling out Spotify for promoting lies and misinformation that are hurting and killing people.
Name them.
Joe Rogan is hurting and killing people, according to this guy. Okay, NPC. When these heroic women and men who've spent their lives healing and saving ours cry out for help, you don't turn your back on them for money and power, you stand and listen to them. How ironic is that? Given how the COVID narrative is clearly about money and power and not about COVID at this point. And isn't this such an unironic, I have got absolutely no questions for the multi-billion-dollar corporation Pfizer or any of those people. No questions at all. But Joe Rogan talking to a guy who's like, yeah, I think there may be special interests and this is mass formation psychosis. And I think you may be, in the grip of something that's beyond your understanding. He's like, no, that guy's a bigot. He's killing people.
But even if you take those power dynamics out of it, the fact they're a billionaire company and all this, Joe Rogan might be very rich. 100 million from Spotify. Also, maybe brought off by, I don't know, big no mask, whoever they are. But
big anti-vax.
But the point there is just you can see how these people engage with what they're talking about. And as mentioned previously, when Jordan Peterson went on there, the beautiful thing about Joe Rogan and why so many people like him is because he is sincerely curious. When he's engaging with whoever, he is sincerely curious to find out what they think and where he might be wrong. And that's why he's so attractive as someone to watch, regardless of whether or not he takes your side in an argument. And whereas...
well, yes. Yeah, exactly. But by
very
comparison...
uncurious.
Yeah. People literally saying you're not allowed to think or inquire about these things at all. So he says, as I write this letter, we've now gotten the last 27 years of my music taken off Spotify. Okay, I don't know who you are. Don't care. There was a rumor that Barry Manilow was joining as well. And so Barry Manilow would be like, no. I didn't even know he's still alive. These are people from when my parents were young. Like, I can't believe that it seems to be a way for the boomers to essentially say, hey, we're not dead yet. Right? Anyway.
Please buy my songs.
So, yeah, Neil Young, as we covered previously, came out and had whined about this. And so Spotify pulled his music. But is it that this is where it stops, Neil? Now you've engaged in the purity spiral. Now that you've been like, actually, I am holier than thou, and it's me or Joe Rogan, pick. Is that where you want to be, really? Because you get the little, I can't swear, but the journalists at places like the Daily Beast saying, well, hang on a second, Mr. Young, aren't you a spreader of misinformation too?
That's beautiful.
Isn't it? Isn't it just? Listen to this. For his stance, Young is basking in praise as a principled musician, willing to sacrifice his own streaming revenue in the name of science. I'm sure he's got hundreds of millions of dollars. Like, in the name of science, technological progress, and public health. Raging for the machine.
Sorry, yeah, that's why I became a musician, not a scientist.
Yeah. This is the same Neil Young who, in 2015, released an entire album, The Monsanto Years, which wall to wall with songs from an anti-biotechnology point of view. So once, say only 7 years ago, Neil Young was slightly concerned about massive corporate conglomerates who control fundamental aspects of our society. And now, nothing to say. Joe Rogan, that person doing the inquiries, he's a problem. Right? Young's anti-GMO rhetoric helped fuel a narrative that made it easy to spread fear and distrust about COVID vaccines. Is that a causal relationship?
Hang on. His anti-GMO rhetoric meant that people didn't want to make genetically modified crops, which led to thousands of people probably starving to death.
That's one of their arguments.
But that means that this dude alone, with his rhetoric, has probably verifiably caused more deaths than Joe Rogan has.
Possibly. Neither of these people have caused deaths, let's be clear.
Sure, but if you're going to make this argument that you make an argument, someone believes it and does a stupid thing.
Yes, but let's be clear, neither of these people have caused deaths. This is hysterical nonsense, as Dr. Malone will call it, mass formation psychosis, right? But this anti-GMO rhetoric helped fuel a narrative that made it easy to spread fear and distrust about COVID vaccines. Prove it. Prove that there is a causal connection between Neil Young and people not trusting the COVID vaccine narrative. You can't. There is no connection here, and they know it, right? But anyway, this Monsanto album doubled as activism, amplifying misinformation about GMOs to large mainstream audiences. I think they're overstating the case there a bit. But he was also invited on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert to talk about this. I didn't know that. Back when the left was mildly skeptical of corporate power, Neil Young was invited onto Colbert. So you're against Monsanto? Well, yeah, I'm concerned that literally you're not allowed to plant their seeds. That's a violation.
Colbert said, you're a science denier. I'm sorry. You need to leave.
No. He said, have you got any scientific evidence showing that GMOs are safe? And Young dismissed it out of hand, retorting, that must be a Monsanto study that didn't notice the terrible diseases and all the things that are happening. I have no idea about any of this. But so this is very interesting. Very interesting how already, literally within days, the purity spiral is already snapping at his heels. Wait a minute. Don't you trust Monsanto? So why do you trust Monsanto? I trust Monsanto about as much as I trust Pfizer. I don't trust any of them. Why would you?
I bet within a week he's going to say sorry. I bet he's going to go back on it.
So. I hope it continues. But anyway, so this all accumulated with the hashtag #ByeByeSpotify trending on Twitter, and a bunch of really insufferable people just being like, there's a vaccine disinformation. We're never told what the actual disinformation is.
It's never specific, is it?
No. I don't know what I watched the Malone podcast because like tens of millions of other people did. And I was like, okay, I don't know. It's his opinion. That's the opinion of people who literally can't stand to hear other opinions. I don't care. I'm not getting your goddamn vaccine. Anyway, you get people like this.
I love your return essentially to org is just like, I don't know, but nah.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know and I don't care. Like, so you see it's like, and this has affected Spotify's market share and their stocks. You can go to the next one and see Dr. Eric Ding, who's just like, oh, that's it. deleting Spotify because vaccine disinformation is not cool. And this is, of course, affecting their share price. Okay, don't care. For some reason, we had to hear from Harry and Meghan.
That's right. We're going to have to do some kind of share activism again, like GameStop.
I mean, I've still got my stonks.
Is that going to become part of the culture war full time now? Just whenever something happens, we just buy their stock. Sorry, that's
make some money.
Not financial advice.
Yeah. Anyway, Harry and Meghan had to weigh in on this. Do you know why?
What, it's racism now?
No, because they have a podcast with Spotify for $18 million.
Well, no one watches it.
Of course.
And they want some publicity.
More that people like, why are you still on Spotify? And so they're like, well, we've continued to express our concerns to Spotify to ensure changes to its platform are made to help address this public health crisis. We look to Spotify to meet this moment and are committed to continuing our work together as it does. Yeah, so they're not abandoning their $18 million contract with Spotify over this. Really interesting how money binds people to these things, isn't it? Interestingly, right, they have only produced one podcast for Spotify.
Working hard.
Yeah, working really hard. And that was...
stress on them.
That was in 2020. So it's been almost 2 years now.
And it's Sarkeesian levels of production.
Yes, it is. And the funny thing about this as well is that Spotify essentially had to take over the production of their own podcast. Go to the next one, John. They actually hired a number of in-house producers to deliver the deal after waiting more than a year for any material.
£18 million.
One podcast.
One episode.
I wish we could get that sort of money, I tell you. But apparently they're recruiting new staff to work in Harry and Meghan's Archwell Audio in Los Angeles for podcasts that feature the voices of high-profile women. Only got one episode.
Was Harry not speaking it?
I listened to a part of it and it's really crap. But anyway, the real problem with this, and this is what this is all about, is that this is something that the media cannot control. And that's the problem with it. And everyone can see that that's the problem with it. You know, they're never making any specific allegations. Like Joe Rogan, he's not saying like, oh, COVID doesn't exist or blah, 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 blah. He's not making any allegations like this. What it is he's just having a free-form conversation. And CNN don't get to diddle with it. Let's watch this next clip.
Kat, you wrote on Twitter about Spotify. You went viral for a comment about it yesterday. Tell us your point of view first about this Spotify mess, because it's really dominated the week.
Yeah, you know, what I think is interesting about the backlash against Spotify vis-a-vis Joe Rogan is that, people are fundamentally angry about not being able to stop his audience from wanting news that is bad for them, wanting something that's bad for them. So, we're all haunted by the specter of this guy who's listening to Joe Rogan and internalizing this bad information and making bad choices as a result. But Rogan is like a weed that sprang up outside the mainstream media ecosystem, and he thrived there, and he has this huge audience. And that's what's really scary, that Spotify could kick him off tomorrow and it wouldn't make a dent. It wouldn't make a dent in his audience. People would still listen to him. And crucially, they still wouldn't trust more mainstream media sources. And I think that's what's really, really frightening to people.
Oliver, do you agree?
Isn't that mad?
That's a beautiful clip. Because you can see that she's a CNN writer.
Yeah.
As openly kind of saying, CNN is a propaganda factory and also we're crap. No one even watches us. We couldn't even force people to watch us if we tried.
It's more than that, though. It's like we want to be able to stop their audience from wanting news that is bad for them.
Yeah, harmful to them.
Exactly. So, no, we know what your true interests are, and we are annoyed that we don't have access to Rogan's audience in order to modify what his audience are thinking. This spectre, this hypothetical person they've dreamt up in their head, who they have no idea about, they can't put a name on them, doesn't match any real person, but they've dreamt up a spectre, and so now, on the basis of this paranoia, they have to hound Rogan until he bends the knee. That's what this is about, right? This is wild. The arrogance, the audacity of these people is just beyond, honestly beyond it. And then we're like, well, Spotify could kick him off tomorrow and it wouldn't make a dent. Yeah, on his audience. It'd destroy Spotify. That'd be terrible for them. But Joe Rogan will just be like, okay, well, I'll set up a website then.
I'll just stream on Getter. Who
Yeah,
cares?
exactly. Yeah, exactly. I'll stream on Getter.
But it's also the point there, as I mentioned, the propaganda machine part, that she's openly saying that, yes, our entire outlet is about controlling the narrative.
Yes.
And therefore, we're not sincerely curious, whereas Joe Rogan is, and he will have a conversation with you. We won't.
Yeah.
We'll never have a conversation with you. We have a controlled understanding.
And more than that, we're annoyed that we can't get to Rogan's audience to censor them and to censor the things they think.
They value a free discussion.
Exactly. We literally want to narrow the range of things they are able to think about. Like, what an evil thing that they're doing. But anyway, and so it's good. It's very heartening, really, that Joe Rogan is, of course, more popular than all of them combined, which is hilarious. Apparently, he gets 11 million per episode, viewers per episode, listeners per episode. And, of course, any of the mainstream pundits don't come anywhere close. And the ones that do are all Republicans. So, CNN on suicide watch.
Ben Shapiro dabbing on CNN.
Yeah, good. But the point is, this is something that Spotify so far has been relatively firm on because, of course, Joe Rogan is costing them a lot of money. But this is not going to last forever. And I think that eventually they will end bending the knee because they have already started making concessions when they didn't need to. They've added content warnings to things now.
Didn't have to.
They didn't have to do any of this. So they began by publishing their long-standing platform rules, because apparently they didn't have published rules before this, which I didn't know. And so they're working to add content advisory to any podcast episode that includes a discussion about COVID-19. And the advisory will direct listeners to our dedicated COVID-19 hub, a resource that provides easy access to data-driven facts, blah, 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 blah. Scientists, academics, blah, 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 blah. Okay, fine. The managerial state has taken over. Got it. All right. We will also begin testing our ways to highlight our platform rules and our creators. Blah blah blah. Right. So you're going to start slowly but surely shrinking and coming in. No, you said this. You said that. Chipping away at people's conversations until eventually it's just the CNN narrative right at the end. And so eventually, Joe Rogan hadn't said anything about this as well.
Do you mind if I mention real quickly? Because there is
Sure.
one thing in there that's really funny.
Go on.
Because they list, it's very basic levels of rules. But they list that they're going to add content warnings to discussions about COVID-19. So it means Joe Rogan is getting like the 19s rapper treatment, where it's like, got explicit language.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
Be careful, mommy, don't buy this for the kids.
Yeah.
As if you're a child. As if you can't see what they're talking about COVID.
As if that made the thing itself uninteresting as well. Like that when I was a kid, man, the explicit label, oh great, this has got an explicit label. I literally remember thinking this. Anyway, so Joe Rogan put up a statement on Instagram and it's like a 10-minute video, so I'll just give you a summary of it. But to be perfectly clear, this was a very reasonable and level-headed response to what is essentially a non-issue, but a massive whirlwind of drama that's been created on Twitter by a bunch of people who feel their relevance waning. And there's something about the security with which Rogan puts this across that's very reassuring. See, he knows that the force is with him and that they're desperately clawing at him just to grab anything that they can. But he gives concessions to them I don't think he needed to do, but he is much more moderate and temperate than I would have been about this. And he points out that, look, I'm not trying to destroy you. I didn't try to do anything.
Don't even think about you.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. I don't think about you at all is basically his opinion, right? And so he explains that, look, he gets experts on who don't agree with the official narrative because he's curious, and he hates the term misinformation, and he points out in very, very well done as well, saying that, look, we weren't allowed to say that vaccinated could spread COVID or that cloth masks was effective or that COVID may have come from a lab, but these are all mainstream talking points now. So what is misinformation changes, and it changes quickly.
It wasn't just, oh, this is silly. It was, that would get you banned.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And have any of those people who are banned been unbanned? Of course not.
Of course not. Even though they're now, of course, all right, or at least all on point with the mainstream narrative. And he says, look, I don't know if they're right. I don't know that they're right. I'm just talking to these people. These what are essentially just like, barroom conversations you would have with someone, Joe Rogan's having, and people are like, oh, that's cool. It's like, yeah, no, that's not cool because millions of people are watching them BTFO on narratives. We can't have that. And so he apologizes to Neil Young and Joni Mitchell saying, I'm sorry they feel that way. I don't want that. I'm a fan of theirs. So, okay. But he says he's going to do his best to balance these controversial viewpoints with other people's perspectives so he can find a better point of view, which is hilarious, right? All of them are like, our narrative. Joe Rogan has a conversation and they're like, no. And it's like, okay, I promise I'll balance out the two narratives. directly implying that nobody's paying attention to them. Nobody cares. And they're like, no, I will represent CNN's narrative on my podcast just so the public can hear it. Okay? You losers. You absolute losers. Like, this is so funny. It's such a demonstration of just the power of just one guy. Just doing a podcast, talking to some people who he thinks are interesting. And then the entire cathedral shrieking and howling and joking, okay, I'll give you some representation. Amazing. I love the way it's going. But the thing is, eventually the howling will probably get so much. And so many of these little whiners will get together that eventually Spotify will probably have to do something. But I do not think this is the end of the controversy.
No. Nor will it actually hurt Joe Rogan, as the CNN editor said.
Well, it's certainly not hurting his popularity. So.
No. I love how you mentioned the fact it's such a dead medium.
Yeah.
Cable television, CNN.
Joe's position is, I will try and represent your perspective. And you can see as well, the good thing about this as well is, can you scroll down in the comments there on that on the Instagram thing? So you see the rocks posted there, and like you get to see all the celebrities who are like, actually, maybe Joe Rogan's right about having dialogue and discourse. It's good, very, very good.
Did you see the point? I think it was Bill Maher had a section on his show that someone said, "Oh, I'm done with COVID," and everyone was like, "Oh, finally in the mainstream." And
Barry Weiss,
Tim Pool made the very good point. It was like, I don't care, because quite frankly, this whole ecosphere is dying and dead, and we're making the news cycle ourselves. People like Joe Rogan in a whole new way. And therefore, when you see the old media sort of catching up or clawing for relevancy, that's what that is.
Joe Rogan might give you a spot on his podcast one day.
Maybe, if you're nice. If you enjoyed that section from the podcast, The Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to subscribe to get access to all the premium content on the site, such as an oldie but a goldie, so I'd mention it again, which is the interview with Miles Routledge, otherwise known as Miles of Kabul, or That Mad Lad. And if you'd like to find out what else I'm up to, you can always follow me on Getter at Callum on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.